Good evening and welcome back to Vegas October 1 Sounds, the Hunter Chronicles. Tonight, again, another episode on September 29th. This time we're going to make a graph of the LIR events. So let's get right to it. In creating a graph, we're going to explore the events, the groups of the events, and the interpretation of the events. But first you got to start with the very basics. First we're going to need a scale, and it's the usual 24-hour time scale. The one I've been using on other charts, and the one I will continue to use on charts to come. And with it, we're going to plot or graph, so to speak, the lock interrogation events. I'm not going to do each individual event as a data point, but groups of events that kind of hang together, predominantly in 1 minute intervals. So let's have some fun, shall we? There's the first entry, there's the second minute, and so on and so forth. And these are the early AM hours, those hours that the FIT report said that he was downstairs gambling the whole evening, which, you know, we were questioning what was really going on, but by the lock interrogation report here, we see that there was in fact something happening up there at room 32-135 in the early morning hours. Next, we jump to 5:47 a.m. and everybody agrees that something happened at 5:47 a.m., whether it was quit gambling or whether he went back to his room or both. And then a little after midnight, we see that a staff employee jumped into the game and went into room 134 for about 4 minutes. His name was Holdridge. Then as the day continued, we see that the next events are recorded at 1:20 p.m., well after lunch. Someone with a 5A card, i.e. the first set of cards issued for room 135, made entry into the room. And interestingly enough, only 4 minutes after that, on the other side of the hallway at room 134, two staff members, Z6220 and Z7-UP1, both entered room 134. And they did so and stayed in there from 124 to 159, which is 35 minutes. And we see this sequence of events happened on room 135 before paddock check-in. It's the preparation of the room prior to the guest making his first entry. So this is two staff members preparing room 134 for the next guest. And I put a little orange box on the square on the right hand side of the time scale, and that indicates room 134 had some activity. Prior to Holdridge, the big red bar there, there was only room 135, even though the bars go all the way across. So let's let this thing roll. What happened next? Well, while while the two staff members were in room 134, someone poked their head out of room 135. Maybe they talked with the staff, maybe they didn't. If they didn't, what were they doing? And then, after staff had closed the door on room 134 and finished their preparations, immediately thereafter, at 2 o'clock, Z6220 swiped her card on the door for 135. The room was open from the inside, and I don't know that it's a she. We don't know who it is because there's no testimony or name provided anywhere for these two people, even though these were the last people to clean the room. So anyway, this person, Z6220, was in there for for 33 minutes, and from the FIT report, we can see somewhere along the lines Paddock had interactions with it, but from the lock interrogation report, we can only guess. So there it is. So unlike the FIT report, the lock interrogation report says that the cleaning, quote unquote, cleaning of the rooms did not both happen at the same time. I don't know why they missed it. I'll talk about that extensively in another video. So we're currently at the time frame 2 p.m. to 2:33 p.m. And then at 3 o'clock, we have an exit. Somebody exits room 135. All right, on to the next sequence of events. The next sequence of events pick up at 3:09, and from the FIT report, we know that Paddock theoretically was down and out. Yeah, he was down at the VIP counter checking into room 134. These events here in the lock interrogation report support that theory, because at 3:09 we see that somebody came back up with the first use of a card for room 134 by a guest, and that happened at 3:09 p.m. They made entry, and then they came out 3 minutes later, and they went back in and came back out. Maybe they forgot to check something. Maybe they forgot to open the adjoining doors. Who knows? But they were in there for a grand total of 3 minutes. All right. And then that somebody immediately goes right to 135 and makes entry there, and holds the door open for maybe a minute or half a minute, closes it, and locks it. And then immediately after that opens the door, releasing the deadbolt, and then throws the deadbolt again. What the hell? I have no clue what's going on there, but we'll look at that a little bit later in this video, or in another video. And then some almost 30 minutes later, we see that the deadbolt from room 134 was thrown. Now, obviously no door was opened and closed in between, which implies that somebody may transition using the adjoining doors to get to room 134. Lots of activity there, a lot of activity. And so here we are now after they threw the deadbolt at up there in the early afternoon hours. We have the next entry at 9:38 p.m. That's quite a ways. That's a lot of hours there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or more hours of no activity before either of the rooms. And so now we have two sets of lock interrogation events, both at the 9:38 hour, and both using cards to access the lock. Only this time the door was not closed. The door was already open when each one was used, and I call this testing the cards, because it did not result in an entry to through a closed door. And then 20 minutes later, we see the door open again, and possibly somebody leave. And finally, we're getting close to the end of the day. At 10:52 and 10:53, we see two more instances of somebody popping out of room 134 or whatever. And then, oddly enough, very close to that time frame over at room 135, there was another guest who attempted to make entry into 135 and was rejected because he had no card for that room. And then later in the evening, close to midnight, the lock was thrown on 134, and that about wraps up the lock interrogation events for the 29th for both rooms 134 and 135. Now, as a whole, you can see that there was periods of activity and periods of inactivity. And depending upon how you want to look at this, you can come up with many possible different stories. And what I'm going to do next is look at this as though it was one person, and attempt to prove or disprove the lone wolf theory, and see what we make of it. So, in interpreting these lock interrogation events, I'm going to have a very large bias, because I planned it that way, because that's what I want to try. And if I fail, then the lone wolf theory will fail, and if I succeed, the lone wolf theory will succeed right along with me. Doesn't mean it's the only interpretation. In fact, there are others. And there are sequences in here which will end up, you know, being what they are, and demonstrating things which we'll talk about in a little bit. So, the lone wolf theory interpretation. Is it possible? Is it possible for one person to generate all these events and for us to make sense of it with only the actions of one person? Well, the first thing I have to do is I have to find all the entries into the rooms. And an entry into the room, by definition, is when a door is closed and someone from the hallway uses an access card, swipes it through the lock, it is accepted, and then they open the door, and then the door closes. And we shall presume that they made entry. And those are the types of events I'm looking for now. And I'm only looking for them for paddock. I'm not looking for them for guests. I'm not looking for people who don't belong there, i.e. Garson, or anything else. Just the ones that were issued to paddock. Up till noon, it'll be strictly room 135, and then after that it'll be both rooms 134 and 135. And as you can see, I'm going to mark them with little squares. You see right up there at the 045 time frame, 5A. That means that somebody made entry into the room via the first set of cards issued for room 135. And then the next such occurrence is down there close to the 6 o'clock hour. There's another one coming up close to the 13:30 hour. And now we have two sets here close to the 1500 hour. One for room 134, one for room 135. And then we have two more uses of the cards way down there at 2140, let's say. Now, not all of these are resulting in an entry. In fact, I just mentioned the fact that those two cards there in the 9 o'clock hour, 2100, were performed while the door was open, and therefore they're not an entry. They are a test of the cards. Why he was testing them, what happened to those cards, how it impacted the events of the next day, it's unclear at this point in time. I'm working on it, and if I discover any significant events, I'll report them in another video. All right, where do we go from here? We've marked the possible entries into the room from the hallway. Now we must find the possible exits from the room into the hallway. So that's what I'm marking here. I'm marking all the spots which I believe may be potential exits from the room. And then finally at the very end, there's one that occurs shortly after midnight. And that's what the down arrow is pointing. So I've identified 4 potential exits. I've identified 4 potential entry points. And these things come in pairs. If there's only one person involved, if there's multiple people involved, all bets are off. So, now that we've identified them, both the potential entries and potential exit pairs, let's go ahead and mark on our graph here those regions as being in the room. And I got some fancy little graphics here to do that. Come on, graphics. There we go. I like that. You see how they match the pairs there? So pretty. Alright, so there we have it. We have essentially 4 regions, 5 if you want to separate out the one for room 134, even though it's approximately the same duration as room 135 on the hours after 1500. And we can see they match up pretty well, really nice well, with the entries and exits. And so from this graph we can see, if I have to interpret this as one person and one person only, where they were in the room, because that's colored in orange, where they were not in the room because it's left black. So let's point those areas out. So you see, there are 4 areas in which he was out of the room. the top one after midnight, the one between 2:30 and 6 o'clock a.m., the hour between 12:30 and 13:30, and then the short one between 1500 and 15, oh, I don't know, 9, 10, 11 or something like that, minutes after 15. So, from this you can see what? That most of the time, if this was one and one person only, it was spent inside the room. Only roughly, if you count up the hours there, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, approximately 5 hours were spent outside the room, leaving, wow, quite a number, more than 18 hours inside the room. What the heck was happening in those 18 hours? I'll make some speculation shortly. Okay. So, I'm going to make an interpretation. I'm going to I've biased it in favor of the lone wolf. There are other possible interpretations, and there are some things that are still a work in progress for me, like the delivery of the refrigerator, which was mentioned in the FIT report, the exact timing of the delivery of the dinner in the evening, and a couple other sequences of lock and interrogation events that I've yet to fully explain, may never explain, but are not consistent with the lone wolf theory. So let's go ahead and map them out and give them names. First one, he was gambling. Then he changed his shirt. Then the fridge was delivered. And then he had a guest. Then he went back to gambling. What's that all mean? Well, these are those early morning hours where they said he was gambling continuously through the evening. But yet, if you've looked at any of my videos to date, and you know that in the early morning hours he had a shirt change. Was this him in his room changing his shirt? Could have been. Maybe he was somebody else doing something. You know, I speculate that in that time frame a refrigerator was delivered, but there are pretty good reasons to believe that perhaps the fridge may have been delivered in the afternoon hours when the cleaning for room 135 was going on. You know, it's an issue, outstanding issue to be resolved. And then at 1:30 we see what I call guest, because I have no explanation for that, but the door was opened and closed, and judging by all the activity and the shirt change and the time of the morning where he should have been gambling, all that, I'm hypothesizing that he had some company there. Then, of course, the FIT report will give the FIT report the benefit of the doubt and say he went back to gambling, because we in fact have the MGM video that shows him gambling somewhere after 3 o'clock. All right, what else can we say here? You know, historically, Paddock sleeps from early morning hours till noon. So let's just go ahead and stick in that he was sleeping. And then shortly after noon, Holdridge arrived at room 134 because theoretically Paddock had detected a stink coming from room 134 and requested it be addressed. Interesting story, again, to be covered in another video. And then he went down and ate sushi, and he came back at 13:20 or something, just a couple of minutes before the preparation for room 134 started. Coincidence? Perhaps. Arranged? Perhaps. And then we see that when they were done, immediately after Z6220 was done cleaning 134, the person went over and cleaned room 135. And then, let's say 20 minutes after that, Paddock went downstairs and checked into room 134, came back up, and that's where he stayed for the remainder of the evening, if we're to believe that all the remaining sequence of events were for reasons yet to be explored. So what are those reasons yet to be explored? Well, we know that he got dinner delivered, and I'm saying that it happened right there in room 134 at approximately the same time that Garson was testing his card against room 135. I could be wrong. But the only possible thing is to interswitch the last question marks in dinner and have dinner be delivered shortly before or right around 10 o'clock, and then have perhaps, Paddock peeking his head out to see what somebody was doing to the door of the other room. So there you have it. That's my approximate interpretation of the events, when he may have been in his room, when he may have been out. And this is a chart without the labeling that I will use continuously now to compare against both the fit report, the images, and any other information I have, and a point of reference for future research. So yes, it's possible that one person was responsible for most of the activity. However, there remains 3 or more significant events needing an explanation, and I'll get into those in great detail at another time. So, where do we stand? Well, here you have it. This is the chart, the time scale chart for the 29th for all the lock interrogation reports, with one possible interpretation if you assume that there wasn't one and only one person that created all these events. All right, and that will catch you in the next one for the summary. I was wrong. We're not going to catch you in the next one. We're going to go on to the summary here. You can read it. I'll read it to you. When you make these graphs, you do something that is visual. And there are lots of things that the brain comprehends better in a visual fashion. And for those people who are visually oriented, it really is very helpful. But for everybody, there are just some things that are better presented graphically. And I believe that showing the regions and painting the colors for showing when he was in the room in a graphical form that's on a linear scale gives you the ability to perceive quickly where he was in his room, where he wasn't. The fact that there's lots of lock interrogation events, but they're not spread evenly throughout the day. They're grouped. There were great regions of time where there were no events. All those things come at a quick glance by looking at the graphic summary. How we interpret those events will depend upon many factors. And I would say, and I have said, that one person could have generated most of the events, but there are a few that raise the specter of multiple people being involved. And with that, we'll go on to the end and the Hunter Memorial, and now we will catch you in the next one.